hey, why don't you click on over to that site, and look at that stuff that you're not supposed to. Or you're like, man, I wish I had some shoes like that. Gosh, they have all the good stuff. Why can't I have stuff like that? Those are nice shoes, Emily. Or you hear somebody talking, you're like, man, why don't I just tell them so that they will know how much better I am than they are? So, you have these bad thoughts that come in, and you're like, well, it's just in my head, though. It's not that big a deal. Somehow, just because things are in our mind, that it's not all that important, right? But the way we think, that's what we're going to talk about tonight, is extremely important because what's in your head takes you in the direction that you're going to go in real life. James talks about it like this. He says that this is where sin starts, is in our mind. In James 1:14-15, it says, but each person is tempted when they're dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it's full grown, gives birth to death. So you see, what's going on in our minds is extremely important. Because this is the spiritual battlefield where the decisions to act on these thoughts is either won or lost. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about how to win the battle in and for our minds. All right, so an important verse for us is going to be tonight Romans 12:2, where Paul talks about this. So I think we got this on the screen, Romans. Yeah. In Romans 12:2, Paul says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So we're going to talk about that dichotomy that Paul sets up there a lot. He says that there's two competing ways of thinking. Right? He talks about them as, we're going to talk about them as the world's pattern, right? The world's pattern, the world's way of thinking. This is how Satan thinks. And then opposed to that is God's pattern, the way that God thinks. And we're going to break that down tonight and talk about these two mindsets. Because Paul says how we think is extremely important, right? Because we can only understand what God's will is, what he wants us to do in this life, if our minds are operating through the pattern of the way that God thinks. All right, in this verse, Paul talks about being conformed to the pattern of this world. So that's a little bit of a weird, verbiage that we may not, think about too often. So what does being conformed mean? Think of it like this. Right? This is why I needed a headset and I couldn't use the other thing. So this is, y'all know what this is? Play-Doh, right? So it's very susceptible to being molded, right? So if I take a mold, my molds are way too big for the amount of Play-Doh I have, so I'm just going to use the edge of it, right? And if I push this Play-Doh into this mold, right, you're going to get, it's like a shape, right? Circle. Can you see that? Thank you. You can see that this is a circle, right? But let's say I took another mold, right? Push this in. Hopefully this will look something different. Triangle. There you go. That's good. So that's how Paul describes our minds, right? Our minds are very susceptible to being molded, and anything that you push it into, it's going to take on the pattern that you pushed it into, right? So it depends on what we're letting our minds be pushed into and molded into, because that's how we're going to look. That's how we're going to think. Okay, I'm going to put up the Play-Doh or I'll sit here and play with it all night. So let's talk about the world's pattern first. What does that look like? Well, the world's pattern is controlled by Satan, who the Bible describes as our enemy, who's out to steal, kill, and destroy us, as it talks about in John. Peter talks about the situation like this. He says, "Be alert and of sober mind, because your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour." That's in 1 Peter 5:8. So you see here, Satan isn't some sort of neutral character. I think we get lured into thinking that sometime. But the Bible says he's actively out there trying to destroy us. And again, this isn't happening necessarily in the physical realm that we can see it. As Peter talks about, this battle is primarily taking place in our minds, where we're trying to be, the devil is trying to destroy us. So let's talk about what his methods are for doing that. How does this happen so that we can recognize what's going on? So in 1 John, John describes what the pattern of this world, what the molding of this world looks like this. "For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, comes not from the Father, but from the world." So that's the pattern, that's what the world looks like. John describes it, the pattern of the world, in terms of lust, okay? So lust is a word that you primarily hear used with like sexuality, right? You've probably heard that term in that way. But the word lust really just means an intense desire for something, right? So it often, very well is applied in sexual terms. So we can have an intense longing for sex, but it could be for money, or it could be for power, or influence, or ability. And John actually says the world's pattern is characterized like this, in 3 lusts. And so let's talk about what those lusts are real quick. The first one he says is the lust of the flesh. Now, the flesh is a term that the Bible uses for referring to our human nature, our humanness. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean flesh like skin and muscle, but it's used sort of for what it means to be human. Now, our human lusts, our human desires, aren't in and of themselves bad, right? So we desire food, water, shelter, love, comfort. And those things aren't bad on their own, and God created us with those desires and created those desires. But we're born with a sin nature. We're born into a sin-drenched world. And so all of that humanness is then drenched in sin, and the sin nature turns those lusts, those desires, into pleasing ourselves regardless of God's moral law, regardless of what God says. And when we allow those fleshly desires to rule and take priority over us, over God's will for us, they become lust. For example, real quick, hunger, right, is a human desire, a human need. Eating is good. I love to eat. Eating is in itself not a sin. When hunger becomes a lust for food, it turns into gluttony, which the Bible talks about in Proverbs is a sin. Sex is good, right? God created it. But when we seek to gratify that desire outside of the boundaries that God set for it in marriage, then it turns into sin. So that's the lust of the flesh. I don't want to camp out there too long because there's 2 more we got to get through. The second one he talks about is the lust of the eyes. This is the sinful desire to possess what we see. So that's why it's talked about in terms of the eyes, right? You see stuff and you want it. The Bible often uses the term coveting for the lust of the eyes, right? To covet. Coveting can include a desire for possessions, for people, for status, like sort of anything that you can see. In Exodus, in the Ten Commandments, the Bible directly addresses this. It's in one of the Ten Commandments. It says you should not covet your neighbor's house or his wife or anything that he has, right? So the lust of the eyes then is this desire for the endless accumulation of stuff, right? With the insatiable desire for more, better, newer possessions, right? So this is the second lust, the second pattern, the way that the world thinks. And the final one is the pride of life. So this is the lust or desire to be first, right? And this entails sort of anything that takes you down that road, anything that leads to arrogance, showiness, selfishness, boasting, right? Looking to put yourself first above, at the expense of anyone and anything else, right? So those are the lusts, okay, that John used to describe. This is the pattern of the world, the way that the world operates, the way that the world thinks. So let's see an example then of that put into practice, an example of Satan using that way of thinking to get someone to sin. So we can see a first mind battle illustrating these three lusts in the first ever sin that ever happened, and that's in Genesis 3. All right? So let me read you through here how the first sin went about. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, "Did God really say you must not eat from the tree of the garden?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat from the trees in the garden, but God did say, you must not eat from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die." "You will not certainly die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Now watch this right here. "When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food, and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. And she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it." And that's the very first recorded sin that got Adam and Eve kicked out of the Garden of Eden. So we can see here those three lusts that we just got done talking about at work here in the temptation that Satan used on Eve. It says that it was good for food, right? The lust of the flesh, right? She saw that it was good eating, right? For that fleshly desire. It was pleasing to the eye. The lust of the eyes, I wanted it. It was nice. It looked shiny. I want. And it was desirable for gaining wisdom. It's the pride of life there, because Satan told her that, if you eat it, you'll get wisdom and you will be like God, right? Be as good, have that position. Side note, that was also Satan's sin as well, and why he gets us to try to make that same sin, to try to put us on the level of God. All right, so that's the world pattern. That's how Satan thinks. That's how the world operates in terms of the three lusts. So let's now talk about God's pattern, okay, real quickly, and how God thinks. How God thinks relates to the fruit of the Spirit. So 2 weeks ago in the first episode of this series, I don't know what you call these, episode of the series, Tom was talking about the fruit of the Spirit. Galatians 5:22 through 23 describes these. So let me run through these. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. All right? That's the fruit of the Spirit, right? That's what the Spirit produces. That's the mold that God's way pattern is. So let's compare the two real quickly. The world's pattern is the lust of the flesh. God's pattern instead is love, self-control, faithfulness. So love instead of lust. Self-control, not giving in to those fleshly appetites. The world's pattern is the lust of the eyes, right? The desire for things that you see. God's pattern is joy, lasting joy, not temporary happiness. Peace, contentment with what you have. The world's pattern is the pride of life, right? That serving self, putting myself first. God's pattern instead says patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness. So these are what the two patterns look like, all right? These are the two molds that your mind can be melded into. So we're in this battle, right? We're in a battle, spiritual battle for our minds. So how do we fight this? How do we fight off when a thought comes in, operating from the world's pattern? What do we do with that? How do we win that battle in our mind? Well, Paul says that we need spiritual weapons to fight a spiritual battle. One of the spiritual weapons he talks about is in 2 Corinthians 10:5, directly addressing what we're talking about. He says, we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. So what does that mean, take captive every thought? It's a weird way of, how do you take captive a thought? First off, before we get into that, it's important to know that just having a thought come into your mind isn't a sin, right? So we were talking at the beginning, and I heard a lot of y'all saying, you've been there before. You've heard, you have a thought come out of nowhere. Hey, why don't you check this out? Why don't you do this thing you know you're not supposed to? Why don't you say something to this person that's mean? So just having the thought isn't sin. Rather, it's what you do with that thought that determines whether you're going to be led to sin or not. Right? So like that verse in James said at the beginning, that's where sin begins, and it depends on if you give into it or not. Okay? So when we have a thought, what Paul tells us to do is to take it captive. What does that mean, to take it captive? Well, first we have to assess the thought that we got and determine, where does it come from? From which pattern is it operating in? Right? When we have a thought come in, is this operating in terms of the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, pride? Or is it operating in the fruits of the Spirit? If the thought is from this world and the world's pattern, Paul tells us we're supposed to take it captive, right? Grab onto that thought, not let it run away with us, and we continue to think about, yeah, that is nice to look at those things. But instead, we take control of it and take it to God. But in order to properly do this, to assess where the thought comes from and then to take it captive, we have to be operating from God's perspective, right? Because if our minds have been molded into the mindset of the world that operates on those three lusts, that's how we're going to be thinking, right? And we're not going to be able to see that this is not the right way to do. This is not going to bring me lasting joy and contentment because our minds have been molded into the mind of the world. In Psalms 119, it talks about this. It talks about how, as a young person, do you live in a world like this? In Psalms 119, it says this: how can a young person stay on the path to purity? By living according to your word. So what you're spending your time on is going to determine what your mind is being molded into, right? The more time you spend with God, the more you're going to be like him. And the more time you spend with the world, the more your mind will be like it. All right, so real quickly, so I'm running a little bit behind time. Let's look at an example of this in practice, right? Through our prime example for how to live in this life, Jesus. Hebrews 4:15 tells us that Jesus lived this life just like us and was tempted in every way the same way we are. So that's great. We can look at Jesus, who went through these same temptations that you're going through at school and at home every day. All right, so let me read through this. In Matthew 4:1-11, we see a spiritual battle that takes place between Satan and Jesus. Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. All right, so fasting means you go without food. He's done it for 40 days, so it's like a big understatement that he's hungry. If you've gone 40 days without eating, you're going to be very hungry, right? And the tempter came to him in this weakened state, and he says, if you are the Son of God, so pay attention, he's always going to challenge God, challenge Jesus' identity here. If you are the Son of God, then tell these stones to become bread. He hits him right away with the lust of the flesh, right? Turn these rocks into bread, right? Follow what I say, demonstrate to me that you are who you are. But Jesus knew that wasn't God's will for him, and he says, "It is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes out of the mouth of God." Tackles the first lust. Once again, the devil took him to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. "If you're the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone." Here we've got the pride of life. So Satan dares Jesus to throw himself down from the temple and then show supernaturally in front of all the people who would be there that he was the Messiah, right? This wasn't God's plan for how he wanted to reveal his son to the people. And so Jesus answered and says, "It's also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." And then finally, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. "And all this I will give you," he said, "if you will bow down and worship me." So finally, here we've got the lust of the eyes attacking Jesus. So I'll give you all the possessions in this world right now. You just have to worship me. And Jesus once again says to him, "Away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." Then the devil left him, and the angels came and attended him. So real quickly, as I start to wrap this up, we can see how Jesus reacts to each and every one of these temptations. Every time that the devil came at him with one of those three lusts, Jesus took that thought captive, right, and responded directly with Scripture. He quotes from Deuteronomy every time. So in order for us to properly take thoughts captive, we need to know what God's thoughts are. And the way that you do that is by spending time with God, allowing him to mold you into his image, instead of, allowing ourselves to be molded into the pattern of this world. All right, so let me end here with a question and a challenge. So ask yourself, which mold are you being pressed into? Which thought pattern are you most finding yourself thinking through? Is it the pattern of the world, controlled by the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and pride? Or is it the pattern of God, controlled by the Spirit and the fruits of the Spirit? So if the only time that you're spending with God is Sunday morning when your parents take you to church and here at Unite, and the rest of the week, you're not giving God another thought until, next Sunday. So you spend like 7 days then just being bombarded hourly, daily by the world's way of thinking, right? And the more you're pressed into that, you can't help but think like that, right? Because that's what you see. That's what you experience. So we have to spend time in God's presence to allow him to transform our mind from that world's way of thinking, which is our natural inclination, into his way of thinking. So here's my challenge. If you don't currently have a practice of daily spending time with God, reading his word and praying and talking to him, then I want to challenge you to make that, I don't want to say New Year's resolution because those are like notoriously not kept. Make that a decision that you choose to follow for the rest of your life. We're talking about this being the first day of the rest of your life.